Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Kendrick Johnson, sports editor of the McKinney Courier-Gazette, as well as Devin Hassan, sports editor for the Mesquite News and the Rowlett Lakeshore Times. And gentlemen, let's keep talking some football. Let's continue our ongoing high school football preview in anticipation of the upcoming season, in anticipation of the upcoming release of our 6th annual market-wide football tab that we call the Gridiron Preview. First off, big thanks to Taylor Ragland, Brian Murphy, and Justin Thomas for holding on the podcast in my absence. I decided to come back, even though my flight home got delayed by 4 hours. I decided to come back just so we could keep previewing for, the upcoming football season. So for this edition of the podcast, we're going to keep rolling through our 5A districts. We're going to talk about today District 7-5A Division 1. This is going to be 7-5A week for the podcast. We'll talk about Division 2 on Thursday, focusing on Division 1 today. And just as a quick refresher, for those who do not know, 7-5A Division 1 consists of the two 5A Mesquite ISD schools, so Poteet and West Mesquite, McKinney North, as well as Tyler John Tyler, Texas High, all the way out in Texarkana, Sherman, and Wiley East. So as we've done for the for the last few editions of the podcast, we're going to focus on primarily the teams that are within our coverage area, so those two Mesquite schools plus McKinney North. For each team, we're going to discuss the the biggest storyline heading into the season for each team, plus kind of your general outlook, just kind of right now, sight unseen, kind of what you kind of expect, where you think that they'll finish, and what you think that their ultimate storybook for their season could be, for the upcoming year. And then for each district at the very end, on the back half of the podcast, we're going to give you one game to watch from the district. You'll give one, and then at the end, we'll all three of us will give our top 4 predictions for the district standings. Which teams do we think are going to make it into the playoffs?
One thing I think is key. I know Devin looks at stuff like I do. We're eye test guys. We're not analytic guys. But one of the things is protecting home field is going to be key in this district, regardless if you're Texarkana or you're North. You got to protect home field, because who wants to make that 3-hour bus ride knowing you got to win just to get to the playoffs? It's not even a playoff game. That's going to be very key. It's key in any district, but especially in this district.
So then let's focus on a couple teams that we'll go one Mesquite school, then touch on North, and then another Mesquite school. Let's go with Poteet. One of the more consistently strong programs out in that neck of the woods. Devin, talk a little bit about the Pirates this year. What is the biggest storyline heading into this upcoming season for Mesquite Poteet?
I really want to see what their offense can do when they're healthy and firing on cylinders. Last year they were hit hard by the injury bug. They had to switch some personnel out. I mean, they came out, they had Cam Lampkin at quarterback and Seth McGowan at running back, and Seth McGowan was going to be their focal point. He had flashed his immense potential as a freshman, and as just a sophomore, he was going to be their workhorse. Well, that game plan lasted not even one half. As Seth McGowan gets banged up in the first half of the season up against Midlothian, goes on to miss basically the next 5 games. Without him and having him as, I guess, the primary option, the offense struggled. They ended up moving Cam Lampkin back to wide receiver, which is where he played the previous year, put Dalton Dale in at quarterback, and they started kind of finding themselves. Dalton Dale struggled at first, but came on strong. Ended up throwing for more than 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. Also showed off a little bit with his legs, rushed for 608 yards and 6 scores. Then about late in the season, they get Seth McGowan back, and then he shows what he's capable of doing. He rushes for over 1,000 yards in 6 games. The most memorable being the last game of the season with a playoff berth on the line against West Mesquite in that rivalry game, and he goes off for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns and was the difference maker in them getting back to the playoffs. So having those 3 guys back, as well as Tristan Golightly, who kind of showed off his potential last year. He averaged up better than 27 yards per catch. So their skill guys are going to be good. They have experience at the quarterback position. Offensive line is a bit of a question mark. Ian Meath, who was expected to be kind of the anchor of that line, was in a car accident back in June, actually, and nearly lost his life. And he's been battling on the road to recovery, just personally. But he's not going to be available this football season. So they're going to need to put 2 or 3 more guys into that starting lineup. So if their offensive line can come around, they certainly have the skill positions to do so. Defensively, there are some holes, particularly up front in the trenches. They do have Dorian Morris, the outstanding track star, back. He's an all-district defensive back. Jalen Hodo's another guy with experience in the secondary. Their linebackers should be good with Brashard Gillespie, Jeremiah Record, Jonathan Caff. up in the trenches, there are question marks. But all around, I think Poteet certainly has the firepower to get back to the playoffs once again.
When you talk about just the potential ceiling for that offense, I mean, what kind of ceiling are we talking about with him at full strength? Could this be the best offense in the district, or what kind of ceiling do you see for the Pirates if they are able to maintain that health?
I think Seth McGowan has the ability to be the offensive MVP, if not outright MVP. Obviously, that's going to get opposing defense's attention. So if Dalton Dale can continue to progress the way he did toward the second half of last season, when they had all the pieces in place, if they want to load the box on Seth McGowan and Dalton Dale's able to get the ball out to Cam Lampkin and out to Tristan Golightly and out to some of those other talented wide receivers, then yeah, they certainly have the potential to be the top offense in this district.
As far as just kind of then your general outlook for the Pirates this season, I know last season it came right down to the wire as far as getting back into the playoffs. Do you foresee a similar trajectory? Do you think that the Pirates stand ground, perhaps be a bit higher in the district standings? Or
I think without a doubt. I mean, they went 6-6 last year, but they always play. They open with Denton Ryan.
Yeah.
They always play a really tough non-district schedule, which when you look at their overall record, that certainly has an impact. But yeah, I certainly see them in the top 2 in this district.
All right, Kendrick, let's move to McKinney North, a team that's going to be kind of a newcomer to this, I guess, this neck of the woods.
So new. They played, I think, every team they played 2 times or less in the school's history.
Wow.
So that's how much new this is to them.
A lot of new faces, a lot of new opponents for the Bulldogs this year.
So they're definitely the dark horse, which I think is an old school term to use up in this district. But they're coming off of the best season they've had since the 2014 team. They had, of course, Ronald Jones II and Gabe Constantine, whose brother Cam Constantine is the quarterback.
Yep.
So that's going to be really big because they've been in the playoffs 2 years in a row. Won a playoff game last year. Got beat by Highland Park, but who didn't lose to Highland Park last year? No shame in losing those guys. So they lost 38 seniors, but what's going to be key for North this year is they got Cam Constantine coming back. They got Big Brandon Frazier. If you hadn't seen this guy, they call him Baby Gronk. He's 6'6", 230, and runs a 4.7. He's legit. Got offers from Arkansas, Oklahoma State, and Purdue, and he will be, I think, the mismatch of the whole district. But what makes North's offense click is they find ways, like whatever they see happening, I've seen them practice 2 times in a week and not run what I saw in practice because Coach Hardin them adjust on the fly to what they do. They do a great job of calling plays specifically for that opponent. They don't just run a system. But what they're going to be missing is up front. They lost Zach Frazier and a host of others, so they're going to have to get that line to gel. And of course, I'd be remiss without mentioning Lamar Lucas, who's got 3,750 yards over the last 2 years. He graduated, and they got a battle between Hunter Shea and Manny Fincher. Shea, hope I said Chae. I don't know. Nobody but your man's name. He's more of a power back, where Fincher is kind of shifty. So it looks like they're both going to have equal opportunity to get the job. And you never know with Coach Fetchy them because they'll ride the hot hand. Because before Lamar Lucas, he was splitting carries as a junior, and then Manuel got hurt his third or fourth game, and then the rest is history. Almost went for 2,000 yards. On defense is where it's going to be a good committee. They lost a lot of experience, but they do a lot of plug and play, and so it's going to be very pertinent that they get a continuity heading into this district because, like Homer Devin said, it's going to be, if you ain't going to be able to score 30 points a game in this district, you can't compete. Would that be safe to say, Devin?
And at McKinney North, they're one of the few, I'd imagine it's probably a short list of teams in the state that deploy a kind of a 2-quarterback system. And the dynamic with Constantine plus Dylan Markowitz, is that dynamic still going to be in play for this coming season?
I have no idea because what's happened in the last 2 years is they split carries in non-district, and then once they get the district, they go straight to Constantine. So who knows? A lot of people, that's kind of like a source of contention in North circles because Cam Constantine's a 2-time first team performer, and Markowitz has a great potential. Could have the best arm in the district.
He's more of a pure pocket passer.
But you have to change your offense because he's not as athletic and can't run the zone read and stuff, which is where the offense is based off. And Cam Constantine has thrown for 2,000 and almost ran for 1,000 last year, and that's with them splitting carries. His stats could have been way monster had he not got pulled out and playing against the Carrollton school. So that's going to be interesting to see if they just ride with one or not. But Markowitz definitely can sling it and put up some points off the. I'll be remiss to guy 6'4", 210. He's got the look and got the arm.
That running back competition is going to be pretty key as well. You got to think just because of how much emphasis has been placed on that position in years past with not only Lucas, but you mentioned Ronald Jones. I mean, that's.
If you look at the record book, they've always had at least 1,000-yard rusher. I need to find out how many years in a row. I'll be easily say they probably had at least 1,000-yard rusher for the last 8-9 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if not longer than that. But yeah, they usually find one because the first year I started covering them 2 years ago, nobody knew Lamar Lucas was going to be Lamar Lucas. Like who's going to be the running back? So we're kind of in that same position. So hopefully somebody come to the top, because if you ain't scoring 30 points a game in this district, you can't compete.
There'll be some shootouts.
It's going to be some shootouts. And like I said, I cannot not highlight, you got to win at home. If you ain't winning at home, you will be at home in the playoffs.
Speaking of which, just what's the kind of your general outlook? I know sight unseen before they've even played a single snap. What do you ultimately forecast for the Bulldogs this season?
I think they find a way to get a third seed. I wouldn't be surprised if they scoot up to second, because they have a penchant for winning games that quote unquote people don't think they're supposed to win. But it would be very key that they get off to a fast start. They got experienced players in key positions and they got inexperienced players, so it's going to be a little ebb and flow versus years past. But they always have a tough non-district schedule, and they kind of one of those teams that get better as the season goes on. I wouldn't want to see them late in the district, which I think they see both Mesquite teams throw it towards the end, so that's going to be key. They're going to have to beat, by looking at the schedule, they're going to have to beat Poteet, Texarkana, or what's one of the top teams? Who's in that middle pack?
John Tyler?
Not John Tyler. West Mesquite. They're going to beat either one of the Mesquites or Texarkana. I think they'll get into the playoffs. They got two of them at home. They got West Mesquite at MISD, and they got
I believe it's the finale.
I think.
Yeah.
Ooh.
At the McKinney ISD Stadium.
Yeah, and nobody knows how that stadium's going to play. We don't know. So it could be a home field advantage, and you never know.
Let's say you mentioned those Mesquite schools, and let's shift gears right here to talk about West Mesquite. The old Wranglers, you mentioned they came up on the short end of that season finale thriller against Poteet last year. Well, as the Wranglers try to regroup and get to the playoffs, just kind of talk a bit about what is the biggest storyline for them heading into this season.
Filling holes on defense is going to really dictate their success level. They have 8 guys back on offense. They are breaking in a new quarterback. Connor Neal was a 3-year starter, coach's son, that held down that spot for the last 3 seasons. Curtis Williams is probably the biggest loss. He was their focal point on offense. 3-time first-team All-District, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year. Just one of the more dynamic players in the area. The drop-off there might not be as significant as one would expect, losing a player of his caliber, just because I was so impressed with Ty Jordan last year as a sophomore stepping in. He had 100 carries last year, 777 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's a kid who won the 100 meters at the district track and field meet, so he's a burner. So he's going to slide into that spot as the featured back. Quarterback is still kind of uncertain. Neil Johnson, who was a wide receiver last year, could slide into that role. He played it in 7-on-7, was the backup last year. If he can get that passing game going, they have one of the best targets in the state in Dylan Wright. 6'5", incredibly athletic. I was impressed with him almost as much as a basketball player during last season than anything. Him just incredible vertical, just a highlight film, highlight reel, waiting to happen. Number 22 player in the state of Texas, considered by 24/7 Sports, but still raw. I mean, he was really kind of finding himself last season, and I think that's with a year of off season under his belt, and obviously with 7-on-7, tried to build that chemistry with the new quarterbacks. I think he's poised for a breakout year. The key is going to finding somebody that's going to be able to get him the ball on a consistent basis and allow him to use that 6'5" frame to go up and make plays. The offensive line should be in good shape. Christian Landaverde is an all-district performer from last year. That'll be back to anchor that group. So I think the offense will be in good shape. Defensively, they lost a lot. Their defensive line lost several starters. Their secondary had 4 players that signed to play college ball. So you lose 4 scholarship players out of secondary. That's tough to replace. The linebackers are kind of going to be the key early on. Quintarius Hargrave and Paul Christopher give them experience coming back there. Jamal Clemens, it was part of that defensive back rotation. But again, like I say, they're going to have guys step up there and get in the trenches.
As far as just then a general outlook, do you think that'll be enough to overcome? Just so the defense will be able to round into form enough to make up for last season's shortcomings, or how do you see them finishing in this district?
I think so, because West Mesquite has put out good athletes for really the last decade, and where they've been, they didn't make the playoffs last year, but it's been, I guess, 9 out of the last 11 years they've been a playoff team. They've been able to do that by being able to reload, and especially on defense, their kind of hallmark is having the athleticism and having that speed on the defense. They don't always have the size that some of these other teams have, but their speed offsets that. And I think if they can find the right combination of guys, which I think they do have it within their program, then yeah, they'll be right there at the end.
How big a deal is them beating Poteet? Because I was on the district preview. It seems like Poteet is kind of, they got the Boyd McKinney, except for they're on the wrong end. It's like they won like the first 8 or 9, and then like the last 5 or 6 years it's been all Poteet. And they seem like they're going to have to beat Poteet if they want to get in this thing.
It goes back and forth, and last year was probably the biggest game in the history of the rivalry, just because it happened to fall on the last day of the season. A lot of these crosstown rivalries, that used to be the thing. Mesquite, North Mesquite, Garland, South Garland, Plano, East. It was always going to be the last week
South
of the
Garland,
season. Yeah. I mean, but that was always, they always saved that game for the end. Whereas these days, it's not as big of a deal. I think they play in the middle of the district season this year. Last year, it was a huge deal, obviously, because it is they're the only 2 5A schools in Mesquite. It is the crosstown rivalry game. It's the same thing with any other city. These kids grow up playing Pee Wee ball against each other, playing middle school ball against each other, and then you add the dimension that a playoff berth was directly on the line last year. Every year they have playoff implications. Yeah, it's always a huge game.
Do you think West has to beat them to get in? You think that'd be key?
No.
You don't think so? Oh,
and that's a nice tease for so yeah, we'll pick up the discussion in just a moment. We got a couple games to watch on the 7-5A Division I schedule, plus our top 4 standings predictions for the district, and we will pick that up after a word from the sponsor. Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now. Everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And let's continue our discussion for District 7-5A Division I heading into the upcoming football season. We've already talked some team preview-centric stuff. Now we're going to focus on some more district-wide subjects. So what we do for the Gridiron preview is that for each district, we give 5 games to watch for each district. So we're going to pull. We're not going to discuss 5 games. We're going to narrow that down and pick just 1 for each of y'all. So basically, we'll start with you, Kendrick. What is the 1 game to watch on that 7-5A D1 schedule this year?
I got McKinney North hosting West Mesquite October 19th. They'll need that win because they have a bye week in November 2nd. So North will. Okay. So 2 of their last 3 district games will be against MISD. They're going to have to beat one of those teams to get in, but they both got them at home. So if MISD has that home field advantage that Poe have, I think the Bulldogs should be okay. But that's why they play the games.
Yes. How about you, Devin? Where did you fall on your 1 game to watch within the district?
November 2nd, John Tyler at Poteet, actually at Hanby Stadium. I think at that stage, that's the second to the last week of the regular season. I think that could be for the district championship. John Tyler, a lot of people are talking about them as the prohibitive favorite. They're dropping down from 6A. They've been really bounced back and forth between 5A and 6A for the last 2 decades, but they've enjoyed success wherever they've been. They weren't able to make the playoffs last year out of a very competitive 11-6A, but that broke a streak of 9 consecutive trips. They got 14 guys back this year. They rotate quarterbacks. Devlin Woods and Kaylon Warren both proved capable. They both, at least by their numbers, they can throw the ball. They can do some stuff on the ground, run running the ball. They have two outstanding running backs coming back, and Roderick Hawkins and Cameron Grant. Their defense is always salty. So I think that John Tyler team deserves its praise as one of the favorites. But again, like I say, I talked earlier about Poteet's offense. I think they're going to have the firepower to score with anybody in the district that will give them a shot to win every game. And I think it comes down to it. November 2nd, I think that winner of that game is your district champion.
Well, then let's maybe, I don't know if you want to give away what the preliminary pick would be for that game, but let's talk who we think are going to be the 4 playoff teams out of this district. Devin, you just mentioned a game that could potentially be for the district title. What do you see the top 4 in 7-5A Division 1 ultimately looking like?
You know, I do say that, but John Tyler, at least the last couple of years, has had a tendency to drop a game that kind of makes you scratch your head in district play. Now, in 11-6A, that's not as big of a surprise because at the time of the 8 teams, 6 of those teams were, and really 7 of those teams were legitimate threats to win week in, week out. But as far as this one goes, I don't know if there's anybody else that'll trip them up. Again, the winner of that game, right now, John Tyler's the favorite. I want to see how Poteet's offensive line comes around and their defensive line, how they fill those gaps. We'll learn a lot about them in the first month because it's still early in the season. What John Tyler has coming back with their experience with the 14 returning starters, I kind of agree with the people who have them slotted as number 1 with Poteet a close second. I actually have West Mesquite coming out and finishing 3rd in this district, and simply because we kind of talked about it, Texarkana, Texas High has had incredible success over the years. They made 17 straight playoff appearances. But they only returned 9 starters, and we've talked about it before. How much of their success was a product of being in a weak district with some of those other Texas schools they've been in? Because again, they haven't made it out of the first round since 2006. So, do you look at it? Last year, they pushed Highland Park 56-49 in a by-district round. There's no shame in losing that first round game. Absolutely. They kind of showed their potential. But 2 years ago, they were 10-0. They were state ranked, rolled into the playoffs, and then West Mesquite goes out there and beats them in 30-27 that first round. So I'm not so, especially with as few starters as they have coming back, and kind of looking at their playoff success here in the last decade. Again, I'm kind of prone to say maybe it's more a product of playing in a weak district. So I still have them making the playoffs, but I haven't finished in 4th.
Because there's something to be said for going from a, what might not be as strong a district to a district where you have to dial up that intensity week in, week out, versus like in 16-5A where, there was a couple matchups that they knew were going to have a far greater, impact on their ability to win the district title. You can really gear up for those versus every single week when it's, a bit more of a taxing grind every Friday night. Kendrick, where did you land on the top 4 in this district?
Pretty easy for me. I got John Tyler, I got Poteet, I got North, and I got Texarkana sliding in. But I would not be surprised if Wiley East went on and snuck them.
Wiley East, okay.
Yeah, Wiley East is interesting.
They're legit dark horse because they're just like their 6A counterparts. They get better as they go on, and you do not want to play them late on and out there in Wiley in November or that like Halloween week, and you lose a game, and that comes back and bites you the district standings.
Well, and they're an interesting team because they went 2-8 last year. Really struggled, but they have 15 returning starters. They have a new coach in Mike Normandy, and they have what could be the best player, or one of the best players, I should say, in a district in Corbin Johnson, the outstanding running back. 2 years ago when Eno Benjamin took the state headlines by storm with his ridiculous numbers, people forget he missed some time that year. They slid Corbin Johnson in there as a sophomore to replace him, and he put up Eno Benjamin-like numbers. Last year, obviously, he was playing on a team that wasn't as good, and he was playing against defenses that were loading the box, and he still rushes for 1,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, even as basically the only option on that offense. So with a new head coach with that number of returning starters, I don't think they can make the playoffs, but nobody better overlook him either because they have one of those players who can single-handedly win a game.
That is a look at District 7-5A Division 1. Hope you guys got everything that you could ever hope to know about that district prior to the start of the season at the end of the month. We'll be back on Thursday to discuss the other 7-5A district in Class 5A Division 2. In the meantime, folks, Kendrick, Devin, appreciate y'all for tagging along. This has been Matt Welch with Star Local Media. Folks, you keep enjoying your week, and we will talk to y'all later.